Now we're on. Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Steph. Appreciate it. So, were you wanting to say something about your response to the performance? I know you had one.
I had so many that I'm not actually sure which one I can bring up. Could you tell us about the production? Because the noises, the subtle noises, not knowing what noises were normal to Salima's house, and not knowing that there was noises that were supposed to be in the play. Could you tell us anything about that part?
Yeah, absolutely. I just briefly saw my friend Shantar Yoto, who just popped on the screen there for a second. He actually came to one of the previews where I did not know my lines, so I would be really glad if he did participate in this conversation. Speaking of which, uh, yeah, I can speak to some of the production design, and Julia, you could chime in on this too. But the idea was that so we were based primarily in the Victoria's Secret at Lloyd Center, which is itself an amazing post-apocalyptic space that is really, really fascinating, and has its own inherent theatricality. And we opted for some really minimal, surprisingly cheap resources that really made a lot of things pop there. Some LED lights, a very simple sound system, that a little Bluetooth speaker that ran off of what could also be used as a record player. And so our stage manager, Corey McCary, was able to run lights and sound off of a simple board and his own smartphone. And so some of the sounds that you were hearing at Salima's were from that record player, from our soundtrack. But then I'm also a huge believer in listening to the space, and that's like multidimensional. That's like what people bring, and audience members bring, whether you're tired or you're hungry or you're really emotionally open or you're really emotionally closed. All of that information is good information for me as the performer, as the artist. And then the outside world also is constantly speaking to the world of a play, if you're open to it. And for some actors, and for some plays, it's completely inappropriate to hear the train and the siren all the time. But I love plays that have the intersectional capacity to really utilize that stuff, because it is a really wonderful way to look at the world, a prism to look at the world and investigate the world through, if you let it be. So the lawnmower was not cued by us. The birds were not cued by us. The wind was not cued by us. But all of those things were really powerful things for me to be living through with the play. And I believe that that's the intention of any text that's meant to be performed live, whether people are aware of it or not, whether the playwright is aware of it or not. You're utilizing an entire universe of sensory information, which is part of what makes theater so cool and so different from movies and books and music.
Thank you.
Well, my thought about the play, and I didn't write anything because it took a long time to actually be able to get out of the emotionality of the whole thing, was almost a sense of depression, in that how do you do enough? All of these different causes that you have, and I pride myself on finding causes I really believe in and putting my heart into them, but I don't put my heart into them to the extent that I possibly could. But then at what point do I damage my own relationships and my own living? It just made that so stark that we have to take care of the people who can't take care of themselves. We have to give them a support system, an underlying support system, and get them out of poverty, get them out of everything. But how do you do it all? And I think I came away with, if everybody did even a little something we could take care of it. There are a lot of us that do a lot, but focused on very few things, that there's a lot of things that aren't getting covered.
Mhm.
And I think I felt sorry for the character, because that is a dilemma I think anybody who does any kind of social action and work has, is how do I do enough, but like I said, not negatively impact my relationships, my kids, my husband, the things that I have responsibility for in the real world.
Mhm. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
I mean, financially, there are people who have lots and lots of money who can throw money at things. We were both teachers. We didn't retire with a huge nest egg. So we do what we can, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then I felt bad about that. It was kind of like, well, God, could we give a little bit more? But there was a time I remember Greg going through the checkbook and said, we got to cut back on all the money that we're donating, because it's starting to impact our budget a little bit here. So
Yeah.
those were the things that I kind of walked away with, that it was kind of a global feeling of how the heck do we ever take care of everybody that needs to be taken care of?
Yeah, I've been mulling over that too. I don't think that the play is telling anybody to just go out and join the Peace Corps or something and you'll save the world. There's the note that Wallace Shawn writes to the performers as an afterword in the script, where he talks about his own journey performing this play. Wallace Shawn, the actor from Princess Bride, inconceivable, that guy. He wrote this play, which is amazing, right? And he's still, yeah, and he's still writing. He actually just published a book a few weeks ago again. I mean, the guy must be 1,000 years old now, but he's still recognizably the same writer, the same authorial voice as he was when he wrote this play in 1990. And in this note to the performer, he says that there's going to be times when you, the performer, are going to be angry because the audience isn't doing what you think they should do with this information. Whatever your political or social philosophy is, it's going to feel not enough. And you're going to start beating yourself up and you're going to start getting angry at the audience. So you're going to lean into things, whether it's leaning into the funny bits to try to get people to laugh, because then you know that they're awake and that they're listening, or you're going to lean into the angry bits to try to really piss off the audience and really just get them where they're at, or you're going to lean into the sad bits and really indulge in your own feelings around it. And all of that is a trap too, because all of that is just distracting you from hearing what you need to hear in this play. And this play is not meant to generate any specific kind of political action. This play is meant to create a real human response to what we have all been experiencing in our own times and in our own places. And it's really easy, as a former social worker, as a former shelter manager, I thought about this cycle a lot, where like, oh God, how do I maintain, how do I keep doing work that I believe in and still show up every day and not drink myself to death or whatever? And how do I afford my rock and roll lifestyle, right? Like all those questions. And what complicates it, what makes it really, really, really fuzzy and individual, is that no one is at the same sort of timeline in their stories. Everybody we meet, we're meeting people in the middle of their story, we're meeting people at the beginning of their story, we're meeting people at the end of their story. We don't get to know where anybody is in their own particular life arc, but we are approaching all of the problems as if we were all at the same point. We're all at this crisis now, and we just need to solve this one thing and everything's going to be fine. But really all it is you react to this one thing, and then everybody's stories move on. And some folks die, some folks are born, some folks hit their rock bottom, some folks are just cresting above their the best time of their lives. And it's not for us to know any of that information, no matter how much power or wealth or privilege we may have. And so I think that that's a big piece of why one size fits all solutions don't work. Why, like, oh, if we just build more housing, everything's going to be fine. If we just build more shelters, if we just like get rid of all the drugs, or if we just move them all to the other side of the street, then everything's going to be fine. No, it's just, we're just all adding to everybody's narrative cycles. And for some folks, that might move them on to a better moment in their story. But for other folks, it might be just that one more thing that sends them even farther into the nadir of their narrative. And I think that Wallace Shawn was pointing at that in this play. I think he was pointing at how all of our privilege, all of our wealth, all of our intellect, and all of our accomplishments are not enough to compensate for our arrogance, for our hubris, in presuming that we could have all of the answers just if we worked hard enough or thought hard enough or spent enough money. So there's no easy answer, and everybody's path needs to be whatever path is yours, that your own conscience and your own experiences indicate to you is the right path. And no one can tell you that this is your path or this is not your path without being at least a little bit arrogant. You know, and there's plenty of voices out there that will speak to that if that's what you want. But again, it's the Greek thing. I think it's better to know. It's better to be as aware of all of these dimensions, even though it makes me really reluctant to do anything for fear that I'm just wasting my energy or enabling someone's addiction or whatever it is. I still want to know all of this and make an informed decision, as opposed to just blindly throwing money at a wall and making myself feel better because I'm throwing money at a wall.
Yeah, I think I had an experience that was similar to that, Paul. I felt like it was Virginia Woolfish, in terms of seeing the internal workings, right, of a person's mind and soul. And so often in theater, there's all this subtext and so many things come out through actions. And, we were really hearing the workings of a mind. And we were confronted by the contradictions, right, of a human mind that we all have. And I love that tension. I love the tension of, because I think that's how we work,
Right,
and
right.
it's not about actually any resolution. And for me, I felt like I found the questions and the process provocative, and I didn't feel pressed to rush to an answer. I wanted to, I guess Rilke talks about living the questions, right? For me, it was about paying attention to those questions that were presented and being with those questions, which can be uncomfortable as well. In a way,
Right.
it feels more comfortable to just rush and let's go do something. But
Totally.
but I felt much more about just this desire to be with them and to explore them. I felt grateful to have been presented with them, right? And because I think so often we don't have very many answers, and if we're paying attention, oftentimes the answers, right, or at least options, alternatives will present themselves. So
That's right.
I felt that's really what I took away from it.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Ken and Sean, welcome. First, welcome, and we're glad you're with us. I think you may have missed the part where we asked if recording was okay. And we had a consensus of yes on that. Are you okay with our recording it? And yeah, it'll good. Sean, how about you? Okay, great. Great. So for those that don't get to be here today, they can watch this on my website. Steph will see to that.
I had a question if I could go next again.
Sure.
The thing that gets my attention and really that I live for is, the process, the words themselves and the message. To me, knowing the process behind it is how you get to that end result. And so, I think of, the things like, how is the sound done? How is the lighting done? And those are first interesting to me. The next one to me would be, what's the process of embodying that character? Because it goes from
Ah,
heights to these depths. And I mean, like when he was like
yeah,
vomiting in the bathroom, I mean, I saw it and I like felt the tile. And I remembered having been in places like that in my own past, and just like,
yeah,
what's that process like? It sounds terrifying, which is why I'm not an actor.
yeah. Oh, that's so well. Actors love to talk about process, so thank you for asking that question. Um, I will say, for me, for my process, so I trained as a Shakespearean actor, which I have all kinds of feelings about, um, very mixed feelings. But one of the things I value about that training is an emphasis on language and text. How if you're doing your work right, your text is really doing the 90% of the work for you. If you're listening to the text, and if you're open to the text, and if you're not fighting the text, if you're comfortable with the text, it's about knowing the intentions behind the words, and that intentionality is where the actor has the most autonomy. You get to decide what you really mean, and the audience doesn't even get to know any of those secrets. And it doesn't matter that the audience knows that or doesn't know that. It's how you are making sense of the text. And so Wallace Shawn is, to me, first and foremost, an essayist. He's someone who writes to, yes, to tell a story, but also to impart really critical insights that unfold through the course of what he is writing, which is an inherently dramatic way to write. And so he is already lifting veils for me as an actor, like, oh, this is actually a rhythm of language. And there's a sound to that rhythm that helps me if I'm paying attention to it. It helps me with my breath support, with the sheer physical challenge of performing. And it helps me with an emotional journey that sustains itself. And it's like that feeling when you're driving and you feel, of course you don't close your eyes while you're driving, but you feel like the car could drive itself. You know this road so well, right? When words are structured in such a way, when intentions and emotions are structured in a script in such a way that they each lead to each other with a natural progression, it helps you, the performer, to go on that journey and trust that journey. So that's a real gift. That's not something that can be manufactured. And even, even playwrights like Shakespeare are hit and miss with that, right? Like, that's not something you can really guarantee every time, but it is the mark of a really good play, of a really good text. So for me, that's the process, is just really sitting with a script and spending a lot of time with a script and talking to myself in parks, or for every play is different for me, but for this play, I found myself going to a lot of local bars and just sitting in a corner and letting people stare at me while I like whispered to myself in a booth. That was essentially the process for The Fever. And that's also part of probably why it took me so long to learn my lines. Because there's only so much scotch a human brain can take. But that aside, what else is part of my process? I make a point of retyping out a script every time I get a new script, just to get it into my body in that way. So then I have as many sensory points of reference for a given script. I'm a pretty visual person, so like the shape of the words, the shape of a text on a page is something that is very constant in my brain as I'm performing. And then the sound of my own voice, which I have a love-hate relationship with, especially with solo shows. I start to hate the sound of my own voice after a minute because I'm the only one talking. But the sounds, the way that my mouth makes the sounds, the way that the sounds like come from my chest or from my stomach, and how that feels in my body. Any actor who's gotten any kind of actor training, all those are the really key technical things that really help ground us in this craft, as making it as physical as possible, connecting the emotions with our physicalities, so that we're not all just in our brains, or not all just in our hearts, or not all just in our bodies. We're in all of those dimensions simultaneously. That's when the work is the best, right? And you can tell when an actor is really, really present, or when they're just literally phoning it in, and like, I take 2 steps this way, I say it this way, and then I take 2 steps that way. You know, they're just trying to get to the next closing night. And there are, and I don't mean to talk badly about, I mean, there are schools of thought. Famously, I'm not going to digress too much into this, but famously, kabuki theater is very much that. It's very, very technical. Like, all of the technique is in that physical stuff, and they don't really even care about any of the emotional inner life. And kabuki theater is famous for accessing tremendous emotion in audiences. And then the actors themselves are like completely checked out. And yet that there's like a whole cultural power there that is completely foreign to my training, but I have a lot of regard for, because it just proves that there's so many ways to do this.
The way you described it sounded to me like learning to sing a song. The
Yeah.
lyrics and the story you're telling, and the performance much shorter, but that's interesting. That's very
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a great question.
How much more difficult is it? I used to be in theater, like in high school and beginning of college. How much more difficult is it to memorize a script when it's a one-person show? Not feeding off lines from other people, but have to have the entire story sequenced in the right way in your brain with no cues other than the musical things that you used. I'm interested in that, because it's fascinating to me how you could memorize that amount of text.
Yeah, well, Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Sean came to the preview where I had to pick up my book halfway through the play. Like, this was before opening, and I was really scared. I was really struggling. It is a vastly different creature from any other kind of performance to be the only performer on stage. The nearest to this experience was my performance of an Iliad, but that was with a cello on stage. That was with Anna Fritz playing her own composition of cello music alongside. And so it really wasn't a solo play, certainly not compared to this, because we could help each other out and we could cue each other up. And there was literally a musical score that would help me track where I was in the course of the Trojan War. But for the Fever, yeah, not even the sound cues were helpful for me, because the whole point of the sound cues was to emphasize that this character is lost. So there's nothing, the sound cues would come on precisely in the moments when I literally did not know what was different from this transition versus the other transition, that both sound exactly the same and are cued by the exact same lines, but slightly different. But like, one is page 21 and the other is page 29. And so I can't just jump to the next one and be confident that I'm not losing some really critical information. So all of which is to say that it's vastly different. It's a tightrope, and there was something really, there's a kind of serenity in that challenge, because the only way through it is through it. There's no shortcuts. We can't cut any more of the script. We can't like create another character, you know. I can't call for line. So there's something really, even though I did on opening night, but like there's still like this beautiful clarity of, and that's one of those places where the reason why I still do theater, that's one of those places where theater is such a powerful metaphor for the transience of human existence, and how I believe theater was originally invented to help us learn how to be okay with our mortality, with how like short term everything is actually a little bit better than it looks, and long term everybody's going to die, and we got to be okay with that. We have no choice but to be okay with that. And that, again, fundamentally Greek perspective on the world, right? There's no cavalry coming to save you. Daddy's not going to be able to bail you out this time. This is all on you now. This is all on us now. And I think that's why theater has been so powerful for me all my life, and why it's still a thing that I practice, even though I can't really afford to, because I'm still trying to learn that lesson. And I think a lot of us are too.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
I'm curious, so if that's been true kind of like consistently throughout all of your time in theater, not necessarily what the process, I feel like I understand a little bit about what the process did and does kind of has done to sort of emphasize that. You could speak to that too, but this script in particular, like how did that tie in, the language, the script, to feeling like, if at all, to changing that perspective or adjusting it or emphasizing it, or like how did that affect that perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that this script reminded me to be a little more humble. I think the script reminded me that I even for all of my self-awareness and all of my experiences, this creeping hubris is always happening. And I think that that's part a part of getting older. Oh, I've been there, I've done that. Like, I know how the story ends. These kids, they're gonna burn out real quick with all their passion and their anger, and they'll do all of these amazing things, and then they'll disappear like spring flowers as soon as the rain goes away. And I was feeling that creeping arrogance and hubris, and I think that the fever, first of all, the process piece, I think it's healthy for me to be as humbled as I was by this script, this thing that is just a little bit bigger than I'm actually capable of doing. I want to be constantly trying for projects and pieces that are actually not a shoe-in, right? Not an easy slam dunk. And then getting to make those choices every night, getting to speak that language every night, but feel it in a different way because it's a different audience every night. And in many cases, it was a different setting every night. All of that new information was a constant challenge, a constant like reminder. You don't know everything that you think you know, and you can't necessarily just rest on your laurels. And it's not something that it's not a sure bet that people are gonna grok what's happening, and that's okay. actually. Yeah. Yeah.
Follow up.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna be doing this in the penitentiaries and
Yeah.
the women's prison, do you have any anticipation about how that audience will react? Because these are some of the people who have had the worst side of that coin.
Correct. Yeah. Oh, I have a lot of fear. I have a lot of fear. I have a lot of fear of, again, my own arrogance, a fear of my assumptions, and of the assumptions of this play. Wallace Shawn very much is a product of the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and it shows. And I have no idea how those audiences are going to take it. And yet also I very vehemently believe that it's really critical to be doing this part of the run, because I mean that was the original intention of this whole project, number one. Number two, like, doing one thing for one kind of audience and another thing for another kind of audience is cheating. It's coddling. It's separate but equal. It's compromise. It's an artistic compromise. So if I really believe in my convictions, if I really believe in the power of literature and art, then I'm not going to dumb it down. I'm not going to do something happy and fun just for the sake of cheering somebody up. If I believe that this is a universal, these are universal messages and universal literatures, then let's really make it universal. Let's not just say, oh, anybody would enjoy this play. Let's literally bring this play to anybody. And this is a throwback to the beginning of this conversation. I'm really eager and hungry for the information I'm going to get in those different places. That was the most powerful part of the Iliad tour, was soaking in, this sounds horrible, but soaking in the trauma, soaking in the rage, in the cycles of violence that so many people are trapped in, and how these guys and these audiences, these adults in custody, were so emotionally honest because they had nothing to lose. They were so brave in being as transparent as they could be about how they felt. And it was incredibly powerful to share that with them, to be with them in that, and to be with them as they were discovering things about their cycles of trauma that they had been caught in for longer than the Trojan War. And it took seeing the Trojan War for them to realize that, or to realize parts of that they hadn't realized before. I'm not claiming that we saved anybody's life or anything like that, but it's just, it was to me an incredible illustration of what a real community does when it's really a community. We get to be really present with each other and hold each other up, even as we're very different from each other and don't all believe in the same things and have different social and political and sexual beliefs and things. And it's really scary. It's really, really scary. OSP is the oldest and the harshest of Oregon's prisons. It is Oregon's state maximum security prison. So most of the guys are in there for at least 20 to 30 years, if not life sentences. And there is a lot of trauma, a lot of violence. It's haunted in every possible dimension. It's haunted with all of that. And so I mean, that is a natural setting for the fever. And CRCI is the Columbia River Correctional Institution, is a minimum security facility. It's where guys go when they're about to be released, and it's usually folks are only there for a few months. And they have the most vibrant transgender community in the whole prison system, and they have a gender and sexuality alliance that is really vibrant as well, and they were really responsive, and we've been in good contact with them, at least until the pandemic, of collaborating with them for a bunch of programs and things. And they have also a lot of connections to other community programs as well. So yeah.
When I think about when I think about you and the Iliad, because I was very taken with that performance when I got to see it. Um, I think about you just raising consciousness.
Hmm.
You're in incarcerated people who are having their consciousness raised in a way that they might never imagine.
Hmm. Well, I would argue that they actually raised my consciousness, right? Like they actually had they had this tremendous cultural literacy that yes is foreign to, you know, Western civilization, all the books and stuff. It's not book learning, but it is every bit as profound and gorgeous and intricate and complicated and hurtful. It's all the things. And again, it's a credit to a text, right? Like the Iliad, there's a reason why we still have the Iliad. There's a reason why the Iliad survived the Dark Ages and the barbarians and Christianity and all of the things. And I'm not even sure what that reason is. I can't really put my finger on it. Like book 3 is just a list of ships. It's ridiculous. It's an entire, it's like 30 pages of just random ships and the people who are on them. And somebody memorized that thousands of years ago. That's what somebody was doing, was like talking about this one boat that had this one guy on it over and over again. Anyway, but my point is, that like when a great text really does have that certain special sauce, it connects to all of these other texts that may or may not actually be written down yet, and those other texts come alive. And I think that that's what's happening when you know, any kind of cultural exchange that is real and meaningful, any kind of performance or movie or music or poetry that like when someone is coming to it for the first time and has never read a poem before, it's because this text is waking up this text, and then the texts are talking to each other, and there's a possibility for more texts to happen. And that's the cool part. And you can't bottle that. Right? I wish we could. It would solve a lot of problems if we could market that, but you really can't bet on that. And like just building containers to like create those opportunities, that feels worthy, but then that's just a little fuzzy and a little hazy, and it's hard to explain if you don't know, if you haven't been there, if you haven't had that experience. That's why arts education is always bankrupt, right? Because there's always just not enough, just barely not enough people who have had that experience to really go to bat for it, right? Yeah.
You said a little bit ago that you were going to kind of put Sean on the spot here, but we haven't heard from him. and I'm just wondering about that. Did you, Sean, have any response to what Paul was saying about the pre-show experience that you had?
Not really. Just I think I was first of all, I'm here I know that this was meant to be like a sort of discussion, but I came in thinking that this was more of a seminar. So I've got all kinds of camera shyness going on and things in my abode that make me wonder, like, is this the place for me to say anything? And then I'm thinking, well, that's exactly what this play is sort of about. It situates itself in it situates itself in places that we aren't expecting it to situate itself. And, you know, everything that makes like the Victoria's Secret mall store in that mall what it is, which is an abandoned storefront, like is a container that I think is a funnel for people to like want to go see what this is about. Like I went around all over town shortly before the opening night and was like, yeah, I'm going to go see this thing by Wallace Shawn. they're like, who's that? Inconceivable. Oh, so then it contained it for them. It made it clear. And I knew that, you know, there's a chance that it could be too much, too little for whatever reason, wherever you are in your path, in your journey. And so I went there, you know, going, I'm just going to see the very first, the earliest dress that I can make it to. And then and Paul, you really, you say you put me on the spot, but you were on the spot. I mean, that was, I for what, like 400 minutes? You were 100 minutes of just this pace. This, you're right, he has a structure to it. It does feel like you're breathing in and out of a sense of rage, and then like a kind of a come down, and then you're back at it, and then it's like and then it's the word line. I'm like, wait a minute, we've been at this for I almost on watch, and I was like, that's gotta be a record. Like I've never. And I mean, sure, it's impressive and all that, and you know, I don't want to toot your horn or anything. Well, I mean, I do, but like, it's like that was my feeling. Like, I think what you were trying to sort of generate by saying put me on the spot is that, you know, it's I don't know, it on one level it's really technically intense, and then it's also like, if you read it it's a whole other experience. It's a whole other dimension. And, you know, I don't know what's more worthwhile or whatever, but I know that this is something. I don't know. You opened up a box of thoughts, and I don't know where they're sort of crawling all over.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for speaking to that. Yeah, that's accurate. That's apt. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. I wish I could get my camera to work, but it's not.
It's okay. Sean and I have actually been friends since, what is it, the 5th grade, the 4th grade?
Yeah,
Oh,
wait.
goodness.
Yeah.
No, 5th grade, the fifth grade of American schools. And I remember, oh my gosh, I remember you being incredibly into texts, into the Iliad, into like British naval history.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I'm sorry. I know this is recorded, but because I would be like, well, that guy. Okay, so I joined your school in like the 5th grade. I moved from like Eugene, Oregon to Portland, Oregon, and I was very much out of my element. And I was like, well, who are the people that I feel like I could talk to, or might be, you know, not mean, or have a lot going on, you know, like, you know, like, and that guy has a book that says something about Her Majesty's like naval vessels. What is that? Like, you know, and I'm like, what is that? I've got to look here to see what that is. And once I could see, once I could read it, I turned around. I was like, no, I can't. But Paul, you're one of the most outspoken students in all the in that time, in that grade, and I was the quiet one, so, you know, always on the spot, whether we're saying anything or not. And that's what I find really fascinating about the fever, is that it feels like you're hot. It feels like you're on a spot, and it's definitely like about having a voice and speaking on behalf, whether that's, you know, hubris or not. It's still like, well, I kind of need to see that. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I have my thoughts together. It's a can of worms, and they're crawling all over the room. But
Yeah.
this is something that feels similar and feels safe, in the sense that it's a focused journey, and I'm hoping it'll be around for thousands of years. You know, someone will pick it up and
Yeah.
and then they'll find that YouTube video of it, and they'll put it together. This is inconceivable. How could they?
Yeah. It's true. I still haven't watched that clip of Wallace Shawn, that famous YouTube clip of Wallace Shawn doing this play. because his vision was so different from what we ended up doing. And also, I don't want to deal with that pressure. His voice is so distinctive and his speech pattern is so distinctive that my biggest fear in performing this play actually is one of my biggest fears is unconsciously lapsing into a Wallace Shawn impersonation without meaning to. So I say that as often as I can so that I can like jinx it and like prevent that from actually happening.
Oh my goodness. You said the word jinx. I think that was the first time I've heard that in like years. That Wallace Shawn is famous for being around in the movies as we make them for years. And you know, any actor wants to sort of take the same journey and walk the same path, doesn't want, you know, to step exactly on every like groove that other actor is, because that's like the, I don't know, and where's the growth in that, and what are we doing? Is it an impersonation? Is it just there to contain an idea of a character, and then what's that about? Like, whose idea is it? So, you know, yes, thank you for not doing a Wallace Shawn impersonation. Although I did go in thinking this is going to be good.
Oh, thank you.
Like, I thought it was going to be a good Wallace Shawn impersonation, but you didn't do that. Yeah.
Yes. We're actually getting very close to the hour that we set aside for this. I'm wondering if we should just kind of see about how we want to close. Ken, I'm wondering if you have anything that you want to say. I don't know you.
I wonder if you have anything to say about how you worked with the director to shape this.
Yeah, I would love to speak about Patrick. Patrick Walsh, it's funny, I've done a lot of plays with him and I feel like we're good friends. I officiated at his wedding, but we're also very different and we have very different sensibilities and different outlooks on life. And I think that's part of why we make such a good team. We have, you know, he's someone who has kind of come up in, as I see him as like the last of the American regional theater system style directors, where like his ambition, at least originally his ambition, was to lead an equity theater, like a major theater, like in Portland it would be Portland Center Stage or Artist Repertory Theater. That was his ambition, was to be an artistic director of a major regional theater. And I think that shifted a little bit recently, mostly because the world's on fire. But you know, my sensibilities have always been very different and against sort of that classic American theater model. And yet we both have a deep regard for the classics and the Greeks and sort of the American canon of you know, Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams and Eugene O'Neill and just sort of big marquee plays that are kind of not really done anymore, or just done once in a while for vanity's sake. And he's brilliant at finding sort of the key points of a text, of a play, that have an emotional core to them that the audience is going to immediately key into. And then he works outward from those core moments. And he is really great at picking a team, at assembling a team of designers, technicians, house management, the cast, like that. I think that frankly, that is the greatest weakness oftentimes of most plays that I see, is that you have this great text, but you don't have the cast, or you don't have the design team, or you don't have the technical team to actually accomplish this great vision. And it's multiple layers of, you know, moving pieces. That's herding cats. Theater people, we're terrible at like returning emails and checking our voicemail and so on. So of course it's really hard to assemble those teams anymore. But Patrick has really, really amazing luck at that. It also, I think, helps that like I'm a person of color and Patrick is a straight white male, and he walks into a place like Lloyd Center, and Lloyd Center is designed for Patrick. Like the security people like him, and the property manager trusts him implicitly, and they return his calls and they return his emails. But if someone like me went to security and said, hey, I want to do a play in an abandoned Victoria's Secret over there, they'd walk me out of the mall. They'd like be like, please don't come back here, sir. You know, like those subtle things, I think we keep each other honest on that stuff, where like he takes me down a peg or two when my hostility based on Portland racism is starting to show. And I take him down a peg or two when he's like, I love dealing with corporations. Like, okay, Patrick, it's because all of the corporations were made for you, right? You see that, right? And to his credit, he does. But that's our process in a nutshell. We both really want to do, I guess our greatest weakness as a team is that neither of us are drawn to the gin game. Neither of us are drawn to My Fair Lady. Like neither of us want to do the Nutcracker. And so we're never going to be doing something that's actually going to be commercially successful. We're always going to be doing something like an Iliad or The Fever, or Troilus and Cressida was the first play I did with him, which is again an unproducible Shakespeare play. And filled with like a huge cast and lots of battle sequences, and yeah, it's impossible to produce. And those are the kinds of plays that we're really, really drawn to for whatever reason. So yeah, that's why I keep working with Patrick over the years. He's one of the only directors that I trust enough to keep coming back to. And Northwest Classical Theater Collaborative, the mission of Northwest Classical Theater Collaborative to bring the work to all of the places, as many places as humanly possible, is a really powerful and profound mission. An impossible mission, but what a grand gesture, right? What a great, hopeless, like, let's just go all in, let's put it all on it, put it all on double sixes, you know, like let's double or nothing right now. We're gonna go to OSP, and we're gonna go to Mother Foucault's bookshop, and we're gonna go to Selima's living room, and we're gonna go to the Victoria's Secret. Why not? You know, like let's try it. And that's the kind of thing that really gets me going.
Mhm. Yeah. What else? Anybody?
I have another question, but I know we're at time, so I don't know if this will continue or.
Well, if anybody needs to leave at 5 precisely, now is the time to go. And if not, we can. Oh, thank you for coming.
Thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you again. Take care.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see you again. I'm happy to stick around if folks have other questions or thoughts. The talk back piece was something that we didn't really get to do in the course of this run. So I'm happy to, I'm really grateful to Selima for doing this, and I'm happy to stick around.
Mhm. You know, I think that as much as the talk back piece we thought was going to be important, there was nobody in my living room that was ready to talk about it. It was too profound. It was like, you know, so yeah, I'm really glad that we have this opportunity.
On that, oh, go for it.
You mentioned the Greeks several times. I'm curious your background and what your interest is in the Greeks.
Oh yeah. Oh, how much time you got? There is a, let me see if I can grab it real quick. Hold on just a second. This is my copy of Plutarch's Lives of the Noble Greeks and Romans, the Dryden translation that I found at Powell's 20 years ago, 30 years ago almost now. And I got it for $16.95. And this book and Shakespeare saved my life. Sean knows I was an altar boy for many years at St. Mary's Cathedral in downtown Portland, and the Catholic priests there were very kind and very moderate and serious and gentle people who really awakened in me a curiosity about ancient things. And then this book, the Dryden translation specifically, is just so beautiful and rich and stuffy and full of itself, but also like just really, it really made me appreciate how like a well-rounded life can be a really intentional thing. And then it doesn't matter like the exact circumstances of your life, but the intentions of a well-rounded life can be so powerful and meaningful. And I started to see pieces of myself and see how like my anger and my set, because I was my parents divorced and my mom was very sick and I was not having a good time. I was a very angry young man, but I was starting to see how those emotions, those feelings, those reactions could be channeled and managed and harnessed. And how poetry and literature, writing, philosophy, and yes, you know, exciting battles and things like that, conquer the world, sure, whatever. But like more meaningful than all of that is like, what can you do? What will you do with the time and the power that is given to you in this moment? So that Plutarch opened a door, and then I certainly went through Plato and bits of Aristotle, and mostly it's gravitating to those beautiful little green lobe classics, classic Greek texts where it's Greek on one side and usually it's a Victorian translation on the other side, poorly translated, kind of mangled, but like it's aesthetically so pleasing.
As I read the play and then started to sitting here and absorb it, I started to think about Plato's allegory of the cave republic, that almost in reverse.
Yeah,
the characters starts in the cave.
That's right.
And all the shadows and images that go by are his image of other people that he's never met. Like he talks about his mom saying, "Don't go down to First Avenue."
Right, right.
Never did. So
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And his struggles, you know, going to those different countries.
Yeah.
He's coming into the light and is really struggling. And then there's there's a continuing struggle if he's goes back into the cave, because Plato says that the people that the other prisoners, they would kill him if they could get up from their perspective.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I would not be surprised if Wallace Shawn was actually making those kinds of references in the structure of the play. And it is almost a Neoplatonist approach to it too, of going from the cave to awareness and then potentially to something redemptive or back into the cave, or somehow both at the same time. And I, of all of the things, I mean, this is my own taste, but of all of the things, it feels Homeric to me. It feels the cycle of it, the ways that as an oral tradition of performance, the repetition of language and the repetition of figures of speech, of metaphors, of imagery, feels really Homeric to me, where these are all little crutches to help the performer, but it's also meant to help the audience to locate ourselves within this time and space with a little bit of familiarity. I've heard this before. I think I know what's happening. Oh, this is a callback to the earlier point, or now I'm back in the same physical setting where we were 3 pages ago, but we've actually moved forward in time. And I think that that's really, really smart, even if it is really technically hard to differentiate. Julia, you were going to say something. I keep dropping the earbud.
I was gonna ask Salima a question, if that's okay. I wanted to know, because based on the fact that the talk back wasn't super, like, people needed some time to kind of think, feel, and have some time on their own, if you have had any connection with people who came to the show that was at your house, and how that has been for you in processing the material. Yeah, and kind of like, and then how that sits with you now having this conversation with Paul.
Mhm. Well, I will tell you that immediately, one of the guests who I know quite well, after Paul was done and in the room and sitting in the chair, and she came up to me and could not speak, basically. And I know her well enough to know that when that happens, she is profoundly affected by something. And she put her arms around me. I said, "You have to go, don't you?" And she knew that I understood. And so later, we were able to have a conversation the following week about how she was not even sure she could drive home. She couldn't have the radio on. She had to have this silence, had to just go on for some time. And it just took her a while. And the question kept pouring through her head, how do you live? How can I live in this world? How can I be an ethical person in this world? And it was that kind of almost torturous, couple of hours for her. What was great, of course, was that when she got home, her daughter and her husband were there, and things were kind of normal-ish. It was lovely. She is writing an endorsement for the performance that will be at WOV, as is the other woofer that was in the living room that day. And he the same thing. It was just such a powerful experience, and the processing took hours to days, and it's still happening. The other person that came back a few days later for a cup of tea and some conversation went home and absolutely fell apart. She said, I just sobbed and sobbed. I just couldn't get myself together. And it was that same question, the pounding question: how can I live in this world and claim to be an ethical person? What more can I do? How much can I do? That. So we had a long talk, and talked about balancing our lives. Paul and I have had this conversation too. How do how do we balance our life? And I think that, that helped. I'm a little surprised that she's not on this call today, but maybe it was just too much. So, but it was, it was a very profound experience for me. I love having people in my home and bringing that energy, that creative energy and that thoughtful kind of provocative energy together. And this was just a wonderful example of that, of how that happens when, when the mix is right, and the mix is always right. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. And I think it's really courageous to bring that into your home, that you did that with your friends and people close to you, and that you engaged the conversation in like an ongoing way. Because I think, like, at least for what I have gathered, like that's been one of the most moving pieces is how to continue that conversation based on everything that gets exposed with this script, with the play, with Paul, with the whole thing, is like that actually it's an opportunity for continuing that conversation with those people who are like fundamental to your life. And so it's cool to know just a little bit more about how it affected people, and also like what, you having this here, this time to have a conversation about it feels kind of, it respects that. In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important because it respects it, it honors it, it's valid. This is real. And let's not try to pretend it isn't.
Right. It's so interesting, the juxtaposition between Julia also hosted a performance in her home, and the ways that we got people to come see this show, whether it was the personal connections that you all have with your communities already, or whether it was, hey, there's something happening in the Victoria's Secret at the Lloyd Center. And like those are the ways that we almost hoodwink people to come see a thing. Because if I honestly told somebody this is a play about all the things that the Fever is a play about, I don't know that, like, if I was in their position, that I would be like, okay, I'll go see that. Like it's really hard to talk about this play before you've seen it or read it. And then like still be willing to sign up for that. I almost feel guilty a little bit of doing it, because every time we did it, it did feel like a little bit of a con. To try to get people.
You're luring someone in, and they're not really. Come on and have a really awful awakening. not
Right.
such a great invitation, right?
I'm not gonna like push back on that, but
Please.
I'm gonna add to it, which is like, I think that, after every single show was what's the word? It was, I said it. I was like, if you'd like to greet the actor, you can stay after. And if people stayed after and talked to Paul, like every single person was shifted by that experience, because you get to talk to the actor. It's like that experience that somebody at your show, at the show that was at your house, had. And they were like, kind of had to remember that it was not, that wasn't Paul. That was the
character.
And so having that moment, like, I do think that was pretty key, even though people couldn't really process. I couldn't process it the first time I saw it, like, and I still am processing it after 18 times. But I think like the experience of having a minute to just be like, hey, oh, you, okay, person to person, okay, there's a separation here, and I can connect with you, and there's like a safety in that. And so I don't know, it's not, I don't know, I think a con, like, it is, people sometimes they didn't know what they were signing up for, of course, but you never do. And they got something and they decided to come, and everybody has a free pass to exit, so it's their choice to stay. So I don't know. I guess I am pushing back a little bit.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Oh,
That
sure.
was
Oh,
that was the first thing I had to do, was just go up and talk to Paul immediately. Just like, you
Yeah.
know, here's a person, he's a real guy, he's okay,
Yeah.
he's not sick.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I will say Salima has so far, I've cried at the work of at least 3 people in this room so far. And it's like every time it's just, you want to come to my living room, it's like, oh God, now what? What experience is gonna tear my heart up this time?
We gotta hire some wholesome folk musician
Exactly.
next.
Only the brave, only the courageous.
And Cindy, I wanted to point that out when Selena was talking about the woman that couldn't stay after and talk. She did the same exact thing at your play. We all went out to dinner afterwards and she couldn't talk to anybody and went home.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Paul, I
Different
have this.
person, different.
Oh, sorry.
person.
Oh, I have this crazy question because the Greeks have come out several times, and I'm reading Edith Hamilton's book on mythology.
Yes.
And you know, I'm just at the beginning here, but I really was captivated when she said the Greeks were the first to center man by making the gods sort of in the image of man, right? Whereas the Egyptians, there were these animals or animal heads, and anyway, she makes this comparison. Okay, so this whole idea of the Greeks centering man and the human experience, and of course, that's what theater does, right? You know, and we have to face that. And what's always so elucidating is the dilemma, right? There's some kind of pressure, conflict, tension, decision that has to be made. And so then my husband is super into Eastern thought, right? And so it's all about, we're just this little bitty integral part in the much bigger web. And so I just found, you know, and you were talking about hubris. So I'm thinking, like, is
Yeah.
theater contributing to that hubris by centering the human experience? I mean, it just occurred to me.
Probably. Yeah.
And I
probably.
love it. You know, I love
Yeah,
theater, big time,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I don't know what you have to say to that, but these are
Yeah.
just thoughts that are going through my head.
Well, there's this age-old debate, and Greg, I'd love to hear your thought on this too. This age-old debate between Apollo and Dionysus. Nietzsche first brought this up in The Birth of Tragedy, where he talks about there's a tension between these two sort of extremes, but they're both children of Zeus. They're both sons of Zeus. And Apollo is about light and order and truth and beauty and clarity and forethought and logic. And Dionysus is about the mystery and the darkness and the unpredictability, the intoxicating passion of existence, and the uncontrollable urges that drive so much of us, and the lust for life. And they're often seen in opposition to each other. And so much of Greek thought and culture takes place actually within those two pairs of hands. And there's a richness to it, right? Like Dionysus actually shares a temple with Apollo at Delphi. And they're not actually, I mean, they're pitted against each other in a lot of plays and in a lot of the stories, but they actually coexist in the same plane as each other and kind of need each other. And like Apollo has the muses, but Dionysus has the theater, and like they work together to create their things. And so I have a lot of curiosity about that same question too, about is it really wise to center the experience of humanity quite as much as we do in how we look at the universe, and how liberating is it, because it's still confronting that essential mortality, that essential loss of control, lack of control that we have when we constantly presume to control so much. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
I'm not sure if Robin and Greg have something to say. They're on mute. They're just.
Well,
they're
I didn't know if
muttering
he
to
had, I'll ask for his thoughts. I didn't know if he had any.
Gotcha.
Well, where did the Greeks learn about the gods? From, the Homer and poets, and they're making observations about what our inner battles are as human beings, what we work around. Socrates is accused of corrupting young men, almost in a sexual way, but he's trying to. The Eros is about philosophy.
Yeah. That passion for life is, it feels really unique. It may not be unique. We just don't know the texts, right? We don't have all of the texts from all of these other cultures, but that passion that is contained in that concept of eros and of philosophy as they described it, seems so unique and so powerful, and it seems like a new insight in a very old world.
I did a seminar once on my undergrad, and we read the Phaedrus, the Plato's dialogue with the young man. And then we read Death in Venice.
Thomas Mann.
Yeah.
Wow. That's quite a juxtaposition.
Yeah. It really sort of opened my eyes up to Plato and Aristotle in terms of seeing the connection to other stories.
Yeah.
Could you repeat them? I'm sorry. Death in Venice, and what was the other one?
Oh, the Platonic dialogue, the Phaedrus.
Well, I'm a Diogenes fangirl, so which Dionysus is the whole thing. But yeah, to me that chaotic energy, I just adore that. I do have a question, which is slightly off topic, but we are talking Greece. We're talking naval warships and so many of the other things that you've done. What about the feminine power there? I mean, you speak, you're going to, perform in front of transgender. It seems like a lot of the things you've done have been very masculine, which, no shade. That's where you're coming from. That. Where does the feminine fit into this?
What a great question. Thank you for pointing at that. My high school anthropology class, Julia and I went to the same high school, actually. Our anthropology teacher was Mr. Sweeney at Lincoln. He introduced me to Black Athena, a Martine Bernal scholarly text. It's an analysis of the origins of the feminine divine and how that has been systematically obscured. And also with a piece about the racism of it as well, the African origins of some of the Greek theogony by Hesiod. And so the short answer is that all my life I've had a crush on Athena. She emerges fully armored from the head of Zeus and is the goddess of strategic warfare and wisdom and the city, and the defender of the city, the defender of the community, and the mother of insight, right? She gives you insight, and she gives you all of these different things. And about 15 years ago now, my first solo show was about the Iliad, and it was about the characters Ajax and Diomedes, who are sort of second banana characters in the Iliad, and get a lot of they get the short end of the stick because they're doing all the grunt work and the heavy lifting, but then Achilles gets all the glory. And there's a lot of resentment about that. And Odysseus gets away with everything, and there's a lot of resentment about that. And they make a sacrifice to Athena. They beg for Athena's assistance. And I do have this question also came up in one of our shows in North Portland when I did the fever in someone's backyard in a house in Irvington, where the queerness of this play, the latent queerness of this play, is a subtext that is not explicitly explored or investigated at all, but feels really present for me in my interpretation of this text. This character's solitude is really compelling to me. The fact that he has a dream about a family, but he doesn't have a family. The fact that he's going and talking to so many different women in his life, as a confidant, as a lover, as an ex-lover, as like, there's so many questions that I have. And I love that there are so many questions. I love that it's not specified. As an actor of color, it gives me an entry into this character because so many of those details aren't nailed down. So there's not a stereotypical, like, picture this guy and it's the Brad Pitt version of whatever, of Wallace Shawn. I don't know. That vagueness has been my bread and butter as an actor, because I am cast in the roles that are always just a little bit other, that are always vaguely ethnic, but we don't have a real specification for the ethnicity. So we need somebody who has language skills so that they can still talk to the white person in the audience and still make this character relatable, but also still be other. That has been my bread and butter as an actor. And so my own latent queerness and my own latent procession through my awareness of gender and sexuality is an unfolding story, just like it is for this character in this play, which is a long roundabout way of saying there's nothing really specific happening there, other than the fact that, like, as a son of immigrants and a person of color, sundered from my own culture in the Philippines, I don't get to speak any of my languages. My parents kept me from speaking any of the languages after the age of 3 because they didn't want me to have an accent. And I took that to the nth degree by becoming trained as a Shakespearean actor. I've always felt, this sounds so weird to say, but I felt a kinship to the otherness in our communities here in America, because I feel so orphaned wherever I am. I'm orphaned of culture. And then the Greeks adopted me, or I adopted the Greeks, because that's kind of what they do. But even then, even so, right? Like, I didn't go to college. I was too angry to go to college. And yet I'm an educator. I lead an outdoor school site. So there's a lot of othering happening internally, as well as in the work that I do. And I'm trying to pull that out and draw that out and talk about it and highlight it and decenter the whiteness of it. And it's really, really complicated. That's like a whole other hour discussion.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, are we feeling full? This has been lovely. This has been I had no idea what to expect. I just know I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and this is our maiden voyage, our inaugural experience. I hope that Cindy is going to be our next conversation, where we'll talk more about that. So I want to say too that, in November, when Paul, I guess, John, you were the only one that wasn't here when we talked about the fact that Paul has generously donated a performance of The Fever to the West Hills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship annual fundraising auction. And we'll have that performance on Saturday, November 19th in our sanctuary. Tickets will be $20 and the sanctuary seats about 100 people. So we're done with the intimate 10 person limit here. So, and what's especially good about it, Paul and I were talking the other day, the idea just popped into my head. It had not occurred to me previous to that time. But I just said, Paul, would you consider doing this? And he said, sure. But it follows a month after a workshop that we're hosting in mid-October that Bruce Poinsett, some of you know who he is, I know Paul knows who he is doing a workshop titled Repurposing Your Privilege. And so a month later, we're going to have this performance exploring privilege. I just think it's a lovely coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Look at all the work that Wolf is doing.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, we're really trying. We're really trying. So yeah, it's good. And so there'll be, yeah, if you want to come, I mean, by all means, go to Wolf, go to the auction site, whatever, starting next week, and you can just put your name in and get a ticket and pass the word to friends and whatever. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. What else? Is there anything else that we're doing as in the community that it's one of the areas of the website that we do want to develop, and that's a neighborhood kind of local to the Portland area. So if you've got things that you know are going to happen that you're going to be involved in, don't hesitate to let us know. We'd love to promote work that is expansive and inclusive and all those good things.
There will be a reading of all of the writers who wrote in the Oregon Humanities Summer Magazine issue that I wrote in. We'll be doing a reading at Ron Tom's in inner Southeast Portland on, I think it's a Tuesday or a Wednesday. It's November 2nd. And I believe that that's going to be free. Laura Gibson, her article in this magazine is really, really good. She also talks about the Greeks and the afterlife and memory. Her article, she's a musician. She's an amazing musician. And she turns out she's also a really good writer. Wednesday, November 2nd at Ron Tom's. I believe it's at 7 o'clock, and it's going to be part of the book festival. It's going to be one of the events marketed at the book festival. Yeah, but I think it's free.
That's always a good price.
Yeah.
Well, shall we? Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. And maybe next time, Sean, we'll get to see the real you.
Thank
Paul,
you,
thanks.
Suleiman. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks a
That was
million.
amazing.
Thank you, everybody.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take good care till next time.